HoloTalk and Profiles in Holography is brought to you through the generous support of the International Holography Fund. For more information, visit their website at holographyfund.org.
It's equally
Hello, Martina. This is Frank DeFreitas.
Hey, Frank, how are you? Shall we do the interview?
I would love to do it. How about you?
Yeah, that sounds great.
You're there at the center today, right?
Yep.
What's your responsibility there? Are you putting a show in for yourself or something, or what?
Well, I've actually got a 2-year work permit to come and work over here now.
Oh, okay.
I'm working my PhD and finishing that off, and at the same time setting up the stereo printing system here at the Holographic Centre, helping with exhibitions, just general assistance around the place.
Yeah. What's the stereo printer that you have there?
It's a system that Ikuo Nakamura developed a few years ago.
Okay.
30 by 40 from digital images that uses an LCD screen.
Wow.
Yep. So that, most of my work is based on digital imaging, is based on taking photographs and mapping them into holograms.
Yes.
So that's what I'm most interested in.
Now, what do you do when you do these stereograms? Do you do multiple perspectives so that the scene comes out three-dimensional, or is the dimensional quality of the scene not important to you?
The dimensions are important, but it's not just spatial dimensions. So what I'm looking at is dimensions of time, the movement within the scene, and other relationships. So what I'll often do is I'll photograph something with maybe a person that stays in the same spot and everything else moves.
Okay.
Or I might use a building or part of the landscape as my visual anchor, and then everything else is dynamic around it.
And you work basically with white light transmission holography, right?
A lot of white light transmission. My favorite combination is to do a full parallax stereo master and then do a reflection transfer.
Oh, really?
That's my favorite combination. That's why I'm here in New York.
I saw some pictures from an exhibit of yours at the Holo Center, and there were a number of your holograms that were on the wall, and I couldn't quite tell whether they were rainbow holograms with mirrored backing or whether they were reflection holograms.
Okay, the work from 2006, I think that's the one at the Centre for the Holographic Arts. There were 2 pieces that were the 3 slit rainbows.
Yeah.
With the mirror backing.
Okay.
And then there was 1 piece that was a reflection.
A few pieces were cut in a chain link fence as well.
Yes, that was a project from 2004. I often think about holography as relating to pinhole photography.
Okay.
Because, in pinhole photography, you're not using a lens. You're taking this tiny little point source and expanding it out.
Mm-hmm.
And in holography, you're not using a lens.
Yes.
But rather than taking that tiny little point source, you're using the very ordered reference beam and the light of the laser.
Is it true that your background is in physics?
Yes.
Yes, that's interesting. So you're combining both physics and art.
Absolutely.
And you approach it that way as well. You don't consider it one or the other, do you?
No, just... I think in the process of designing a hologram, I'm designing both from what I know the light can do, what I can record, and also kind of pushing and questioning that, asking myself, could I use this geometry? What will my image look like if I try this process?
Mm-hmm.
As well as, I've got a real interest in photography and image collection and almost the images we make in our heads.
Don't believe anything you think.
Probably a good idea.
Do you find it frustrating that holography is so polarizing when you get out there to do presentations and speak to people, because sometimes someone will either think that you're a scientist, or sometimes people will think, or a group will think that you're an artist, but rarely can you convince anyone that you're both?
It is interesting, and I think that comes from this human nature that we want to put things in boxes and categories.
Yeah.
And I think holography is one of those mediums. It doesn't fit into any box very nicely. Mm-hmm. And that's why I love working in it, because you're not doing one thing all the time. You're doing different things. But it means that some people sort of want you to go and research and make the most amazing technical hologram, or some people don't understand why you're considering the technical aspects of it, why you're just making art. I never quite understand why people want to put me into one of those boxes. Sometimes when sometimes I'll just tell people I do something else to make it simpler at dinner parties.
Which way do you find it's more acceptable? I imagine that would depend on the geographic area that you're in, but when you're in the United States, do you find people approach you more from the scientific aspect of holography or from the artistic end of holography?
Interestingly, when I'm here, I'm considered an artist.
Okay.
Part of that is I'm staying with a group of artists in a warehouse in New York City.
Okay.
At the Center for Holographic Arts, I'm doing what you would do in any sort of arts administration organisation. And so people just assume that I'm an artist. And what's interesting is when I'm in Australia, where I'm around a lot of people who knew me while I was going through my physics degree, and who and other artists who actually seek me out for technical help in their video projection or their geometry, I'm much more considered as a physicist. So I think it's what people see you doing. If they see you in a gallery, they're going to think you're an artist. If they see you in a lab, they're going to think you're a scientist.
Yeah. I'm hearing an awful lot about holography in Australia. It seems to be, holography in Australia was always very well known, but lately it's been a lot of holography news and exhibits and work coming out of Australia. Is there something happening there that's giving it a little bit of a boom?
What's really funny about that, I think there's 5 or 6 of us in Australia who make holograms. So we have meetings with the Australian holographers, and we get some sandwiches and sit around a picnic bench.
Mm-hmm. That's nice.
It's very nice. Margaret Benyon, who...
Yes.
You'll know. She moved to Australia,
mm-hmm.
and so she's there, and she's very supportive. She flew down to Melbourne just to see my exhibition and just to be there and just to encourage, what's going on. And then Amy Rush has just finished her masters, and she was studying with Paula in Sydney. She
was on the show recently.
Yep, and so she took her masters exhibition, and she's been touring that around. I exhibit probably about twice a year in Australia. And so between that's actually quite a lot of holography going on. And most people I show holograms to in Australia, it's the first time they've seen a hologram.
Still, even in 2008, huh?
Yeah.
That's crazy. That's crazy.
It's crazy, and we've got the credit card holograms, but the kind of the mass that 1970s kind of an early 80s wave of holography that was in America didn't quite reach Australia.
Mm-hmm.
And that means that people don't know quite so much about the holography, and it means they're a little bit more open to it as well. People don't know what to expect.
You probably still have people here in the States that are seeing holograms for the first time, right?
Yep. Yeah. And particularly in my generation, we just missed that National Geographic and that first boom.
Oh.
And so the only experience we had of holograms was sort of representations on children's TV shows and Star Wars, and so we only saw holograms on TV.
Yeah.
Which doesn't really show you what a hologram's all about.
Yeah. And we have to continuously, as holographers, deal with that misconception of holography too. Oh,
absolutely. Yeah. I think that's something that every time you exhibit, you're coming up against, and it's funny. I've had shows in the newspaper, and they've been listed, in the arts page as, art, theatre, painting, visual art, and they make a new category for it, hologram.
Well.
Because they're not really quite sure where to put it. They don't quite know what this medium is yet.
Are we all going to be dead and buried by the time people finally understand this and accept it? Do you think? Actually,
I don't think so, because in some ways holography has slipped into our culture in ways that we don't really even monitor anymore. And the way that we use the internet, the way that we use programs like Flickr, the way, I don't know if you've seen Microsoft's new program Sea-Dragon, which searches through photos on the internet and makes 3D scenes.
Oh, really? No, I have not had a chance to see that.
So that's coming.
Thank goodness.
Yeah, you've got these kind of this holographic approach to imaging that's within our culture and that we're experiencing. Well, I think what most people don't understand is that holograms are a physical structure, and to have the awareness of optical structures, I think that ties in with the holograms.
Okay.
So as we're getting optical computing, photonic crystals, people will understand holograms more and more.
Probably become part of their lives as a background more than a forefront.
Absolutely.
You know, we won't even know that holograms are working in the background, probably.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And I think, one of the things I really like doing is I like working on a large scale. So my aim is to make holograms for public spaces. And I really want to bring holograms into our cities and into our daily lives where we can enjoy that dynamic that the medium gives us.
Yeah. Do you ever feel that you're not quite achieving what some of the older artists have achieved? Like, my wife and I went down to the Museum of Art in Philadelphia, and we saw Monet, and we saw Rembrandt, and you just take a look at the work and the detail that's in that work, and then you compare it to a reflection hologram, and sometimes I personally feel that it's really not much more than, clicking a shutter or something, and what talent is really in holography?
That's an interesting one. My processes are very long processes. So mainly because I go out and I collect digital images, and I'm often building and making the system.
I see, yeah.
And then installing it. In terms of compared to those old masters, they had. Painting is such a beautiful process, and you're spending this time and you're focused.
And you can't fake it either.
You can't fake it.
Yeah.
I think with a hologram, there is though that possibility of, particularly with the integral holograms and the multiplex holograms, of really getting a lot of visual information into them. And if, as we're starting to deal with more and more and more visual information and more images, to really be able to design and structure those images, it's more a process of almost an architecture or a shaping that's important with these holograms.
I see.
So I see that sort of compositional side from the very beginning of the process to the installation really important.
Did I read properly that you're very interested in the study of urban type of art as your subject? Or is that just a facet of a many-faceted Martina?
Yes. I live in the urban environment. I've grown up within urban culture. I go out into nature and I don't feel like making. I feel like just being. I feel like walking through the trees, and maybe I'd move a rock. That would be about the extent of it. But within the urban landscape, there's so much mending and making and building and beautifying that needs to be done. And the way the light plays across the buildings. I love New York City. It's visually spectacular. It changes every day, and it wants to be captured into images. So I think that's where I get a lot of my inspiration from. Just walking through the cities. What
was the 10-year-old Martina like? If you could go back.
The 10-year-old Martina was, I think, a little bit in shock because she just moved from Sydney to Melbourne and had been pulled out of primary school and had to make new friends. But I'd say probably the 9-year-old Martina got her first camera that was her own. And the 7-year-old Martina was allowed to play in the darkroom. And so what I'd do is I'd collect these objects from around the house and I'd make shadowgrams of them. And I thought this was magic. And I was a very creative, messy child. I was building drum machines out of jam jar lids, and I just wanted to make and play. And I don't think I actually stopped doing that.
So you constructed a lot of the things that you used to produce whatever it was that your creativity was calling for.
Absolutely.
Interesting.
That's what I love about object-based holography as well, is you get to build these sculptures, and then you record them into holograms. And I always feel a bit sad once I've recorded the hologram because I'm never quite sure what I'm meant to do with the sculpture. Because they're usually just sort of these bits of junk that I've put together. And the hologram then is what I give on to somebody else.
Whose work in holography inspired you?
I love Andy Pepper's shadowgrams.
Okay.
I love Rudy Burkhart's, all of his water ones and his waves. Some of David Pisanelli and Patrick Boyd's early stereograms. They're gorgeous.
Yes.
And
Patrick did some of those when he was in New York.
Yep. And they were all done by
ago.
hand. And I have done by hand, but it takes a long time.
Yeah, it's hand-registered, right?
Yep, hand-registered. And
very similar to the old lithographic printing presses, like the Heidelbergs, where all of your cyan, magenta, yellow, and black had to be registered, all the plates.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I mean, we often talk about holography being very difficult and very hard. And then I talk to some of my friends who've worked in printmaking and other art mediums, and they're just as technical. You know, you might not have the vibration issue, or you might not have this issue, but you know, you're still dealing with very technical mediums.
They were at one time. Hands-on technical, at least. I think a lot of... Well, I don't know. See, I get confused. I don't know. I mean, you take someone who has to do color correction and has to do hand registration of printing plates and things of that nature to do proofs, press side proofs and things like that in the printing trades. And at one time that was all done by hand, and now it's not done by hand. So is it still just as much a craft because it's not done by hand, or is it less of a craft now? I get so confused.
Well, I think we've got the same issue with holography, and that's that some people still do it by hand as an art form, as a medium.
Yeah, I don't think I would ever stop doing it by hand.
Exactly.
I just would not. It's like a cabinet maker.
Yep.
You know, I wouldn't want to have a computerized wood lathe cutting the legs for a table. I'd have to cut them myself, you know.
Yep. But when you're putting 1,800 images into a hologram, I'm quite happy for my computer to do it for me.
Yes.
I mean, you're still doing a lot of work to get that print.
What is that magic number? I've heard that referenced so many times, 1,080 images. Why that number?
That's interesting.
Oh, is it divided 360 or something? Is that what's doing it?
For me, this number comes across because when I was in Cologne at the KHM, they've got a lot of the systems that come from the Dutch Holographic Lab have 200 images across.
Okay.
And then what I was doing was three lines. And then I was tweaking the system, so I offset my 3 lines 3 times. So I was having nine sort of rows.
Okay.
And then 200 columns.
I see.
And that was giving me my images.
At DHL, is that Walter Spearings?
That is Walter.
Yes. Boy, I contacted him a while ago to get on the show, and I still have to get him on here.
Oh, do it.
Yeah.
I mean, I've only used his sort of systems that have. I mean, I'd love to see what he's working on now, because I've only used his systems when they're quite old and second-hand, and they're gorgeous. They're really easy to print with. You get great results from them. And it means that you can really spend a lot more time thinking about the composition.
Yeah. You know, they have these bread competitions in France where the only thing you're allowed to use for baking the bread is water, yeast, and flour.
Yep.
That's all you're allowed to use. And everyone who enters those yearly competitions are all baking their loaves of bread. All types of different loaves of bread that come out differently are all using those 3 ingredients. What do you think your limitations would be, or if there would even be limitations, if you were to work with holography where all you had was your isolation table, your laser, and a spatial filter?
Oh, I mean, you could make so many holograms. I did a lot of work early on with broken glass. So getting pieces of broken glass, and you can use the glass almost to shape the light, and it means that you've got almost like multiple reference beams. Mm-hmm. I've done a lot of hand animation.
Oh, did you put the glass in the reference beam, you say?
Yeah,
or no?
You can start putting bits of glass in your... You can sort of tweak your reference beam a little bit and tweak your object beam a little bit. So both of them are quite a little bit interesting, but both of them are fairly uniform at the same time.
Yeah.
And you can get some very beautiful patterns. I've done a lot of animation as well with hand-cutting stencils.
Okay.
And, recording that into it.
How many you have a large body of work, don't you?
It's funny. I always think I don't, but I have been. I have been solidly producing work now for about 8 years.
8 years, you say? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Wow, that's a lot for 8 years.
Thank you. I mean, the last few years I sort of work on a yearly printing cycle, so I've been sort of collecting. I mean, these are for my digital analog hybrid, I'd have to say. So I've been collecting my images, taking them to Germany and making my masters, and taking them to New York and making my transfers. I also have been working in Korea at the Korean Holo Center.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And just finished setting up their stereogram system there, which uses 35mm black and white film.
I saw photos of you at one of the openings there.
Yes,
I think
that was quite a spectacular opening. I had
that
no
certainly
idea
was. Yeah,
that was fantastic. And so, I mean, I have to travel to do my work, but that it really focuses me. So I might have only 2 weeks or 3 weeks or a month in a place, but I'm going to make holograms. So I just make what I can in that time. And so it's not a lot of my year that I spend printing, but when I'm printing, I'm printing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I will put a link to your website on the HoloTalk page so people can click on that and go over and see your work.
Excellent. And I'll let you know, I have an exhibition in my bag that I just need to laminate and install, and I'm hoping to have it in New York sometime in November, so I'll let you know about that as well.
November?
I hope so, yeah.
Okay.
It's not confirmed at the moment, but I'll keep you informed.
Yeah. So you sort of open up the Holo Center and take care of things on the weekends for visitors and things?
Yep, we're open, when we have shows on, we're open every Saturday from 12 to 5. But we also really encourage people, if they're coming to New York, if they want to pop in, to just give us a call or send us an email, and we can set up appointments.
Yeah. Anna Maria and Rudy, they have their show there now?
Yep, it's up for 1 more week.
1 more week, and then what's coming in after that?
We've got Adrian Klein coming in, and her show.
Oh, really?
Yes.
I was just thinking of him the other night. Yeah, I saw many of his pieces at the Museum of Holography in New York. Yeah. And how unfortunate. He was killed in an accident in South Africa or something. Is that correct?
Okay, now we're talking about different people.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you said Adrian Lines.
I'm Adrian Klein.
Oh, I'm sorry.
She's an artist who works with she's got some videos as well as some holograms.
Okay.
So I'm gonna look up Adrian Lines now and have a look at his work.
Have you heard of Adrian Lines?
No.
Oh, this goes back many, 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 many years.
Yeah.
Has to be, I'm guessing late 70s, early 80s.
Yep.
But he was a wonderful holographer out of Great Britain.
Yep.
And unfortunately, he died way too young. But he had some nice pieces that would be on display at the Museum of Holography. I apologize to your other artist.
That's okay. I'm sure she won't mind at all.
But everybody will remember her now.
Yeah, absolutely.
Klein, right?
Klein.
Okay. All right. Well, Martina, do me a favor. How do you pronounce your last name?
Well, it's a tricky one. The pronunciation, you've got to sort of hide the R, so it's Mrongovius.
Mrongovius.
Yeah.
Okay. I read about people, but unless I've heard someone say their name or heard someone else say the name, I have a very hard time, figuring out how to say a few names.
My name's difficult. Very few people sort of took me to get it right, and it took me a few years to learn how to spell it, so I'm sorry.
All right. Well, it was very nice having you on the show. Was there anything that you'd like to have included that I didn't ask you about? What would you like to say to folks if you didn't have to respond to me asking you something and you could just choose to say whatever you wanted to say?
I suppose I'd really encourage people to, sort of have an open, creative attitude towards holography, and that there's different aspects of it, and there's different ways of thinking about it, and to allow it to be incorporated into other aspects of their life. And just, I think there's a lot in holographic imaging that we can all learn about.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
When you say have it integrated into other aspects of their life, what are you referring to with that?
I think the approach of understanding what a holographic image is.
I see.
And understanding the way that optical... I think we live in such an information society, and we've got very locked into digital information.
Oh, God. I'm just... Yeah. This collective intelligence that the web's supposed to be turning out to be, I'm still waiting for the intelligence part of it to hit.
Yeah, it's quite strange. There's sort of there's an element of other types of information have kind of been forgotten about.
Yeah.
And if we look in the world around us, and the materials that we use, and the way that we interact with things, there's an information content in everything.
Mm-hmm.
Whether that's a light, whether that's materials. And I think that's something that we need to become more and more aware of as we're getting into nanotechnology and these optical ways of communicating information, all the infrared and all the wireless systems that we've got. And so to really understand that sort of that greater information capacity of the world.
Wow.
It's not just ones and zeros on your computer.
It most certainly is not.
Yep.
And on that note, I will say that perhaps I can get into New York and stop by the center and see everybody.
Oh, please.
It's probably about time that I do that.
Yep.
All right. Thank you so much, Martina. I'll have this up probably, I'd say Monday, because not many people listen to it when I put it up on the weekends because they have other things going on.
Yep.
At least they should have other things going on. All right. Take care.
Nice
speaking with you. Bye.